But I would ask you to take note of what he didn't say about the crime itself. He only told you facts that did not make him look bad. He did not mention the robbery of the victim, in addition to the vicious murder of this poor man, this elderly man, that these two young men beat, stabbed, and then shot. They ransacked his house and robbed him. They then stole his truck full of his property, went to Mississippi, where the report notes that an overwhelming amount of the victim's property was found in Mr. Kirkpatrick's home when he was arrested. He doesn't mention any of that. Most importantly, he does not mention the fact that he and his cohort cut the telephone lines of the victim's home. They cut the man's phone lines. So if he was still alive, he would not have even been able to call for help.
That is the district attorney laying down the facts of this case. Now, what makes this case particularly interesting, in my opinion, is that this man was sentenced to death for the horrific crimes that he committed back in 1983. And then about 10 years later, it was commuted to life. And then only recently, the governor, before leaving office, commuted that life sentence to a term of years with the opportunity of parole. The governor did that to 56 other inmates in the last 3 months of his term. And we actually created a playlist called the Governor's 56 if you want to see all those 56 cases. Now, we're about to watch a parole hearing where this man paints an entirely different picture of how the crime happened. And if you didn't have the DA here, if you didn't have the victim speak up, you would have no idea how vicious this crime was. I will unpack it with the details of the crime from the appeal at the end. But for now, let's jump in.
Today we have for parole consideration Frederick Kirkpatrick, DOC number 100337, who's a second felony offender, who was convicted of first-degree murder at a trial by jury on December 12, 1982, and on January 21st, 1983, was sentenced to death. Then, on February 17th, 1994, was resentenced to life without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. And that sentence was later commuted by Governor Edwards from life to 99 years with parole eligibility after 40 years, giving you a parole eligibility date of 8/1/2021, a good time date of 9/13/30, and a full term date of 3/8/81. Does that sound correct to you, Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the first question is, what did you do to cause your incarceration? And why do you think now would be a good time for us to vote to release you?
It's January the 27th, 1982. Myself and my co-defendant was on hitchhiking from Meridian, Mississippi to New Orleans, Louisiana, looking for work. Mr. Stephen Radnowski picked us up and offered us a place to stay in his place that night. In the course of that evening, Mr. Radnowski made sexual advances towards me and my co-defendant. I'm sitting on the couch, and Mr. Radnowski sits down beside me, and he reaches under the couch and pulls out a stack of hardcore pornography books. He places his hand on my knee and asks me if I'm interested in looking at it. And I take his hand off my knee and told him no. This upset Mr. Radnowski. A few minutes later, Mr. Radnowski got up and went to the back room, and my co-defendant followed him. A minute or two later, my co-defendant come walking out into the living room, and he had a fear on his face, and he's walking towards the door. I turned and looked, and Mr. Radnowski is standing there, and he's very upset. And as I focus in on him, he has a pistol in his hand. And he said right when he was coming in the door, this is not going to happen like the last time. I totally don't know what is happening or what to expect. I reach and grab a glass object that's sitting on the coffee table, and I threw it, and I hit Mr. Radnowski. And the instant I seen it did not have the effect that I was expecting, I reached and grabbed a knife sitting on the table, and I stabbed Mr. Radnowski twice. When this happened, I went outside to the back of the yard, and I went out there to try to clear my head and process what had just happened. I stayed out there about 10 minutes or so. When I come back around to the front of the house, my co-defendant was putting something in Mr. Renoski's back of his truck. He grabbed me by the arm and told me, he said, "Get in the truck, let's go." We did that. We drove back to Mississippi. I did not know Mr. Renoski had been shot until I got arrested. I did not know my co-defendant had brought his pistol back with us until a detective told me that he got the gun from my co-defendant, Charles Faulkner.
You stabbed him first and then he shot him?
Yes, sir.
All right. So why would today be the good day to vote to let you out after doing something like that?
I came to Angola. I came to jail when I was 24 years old. I was dysfunctional. I was an addict. I was bitter. I was selfish. I was irresponsible. I had no sense of direction, none whatsoever. From the time I was 14 years old until as long as I can remember, until I got arrested on this charge, I was always told by the adults in my life that I would never achieve nothing. I believed that subconsciously. By the grace of God and the programs that's been afforded me here at Angola, that person is not sitting in front of you this morning. I came to live in Maine prison in March of 1994. 2 weeks after I came to Maine prison, I enrolled in the GED program. At the same time, I signed up for the RCIA class, which is the class you go through to be confirmed Catholic. In April of 1994, I was confirmed Catholic. This set me on a path that changed my whole life completely. And in June of 1994, I received my GED. This was the first time that I really seen that I could achieve. That all I've been told was a lie. From October of 94 until August of 1997, I worked for Prison Enterprise at Metal Fab. I worked in the machine shop. I learned to operate every piece of machinery in that shop. In August of 1997, I enrolled in NOBTS, which is the Bible college here. I don't have the time and certainly probably couldn't find the words that would adequately explain the impact that 4-year degree program has had and has on my life today. It was life-changing. About midway through that program, there was 12 of us asked if we was interested in being in a class that was offered by the Diocese of Baton Rouge, a 3-year program called Foundations for Ministry. We all took the opportunity to do it. That moved my faith from my head to my heart. And the impact is I would spend all day trying to explain to you or give you some idea of the impact of that had on me and has on me today. I have been a tutor in the Bible college for 18 years. I have watched students transform and their faith move from their head to their heart. With the help of some very good professors, God transforms. I've watched so many people transform, given the ability and the tools to go back out into population and to evangelize their environment. I don't look at that as being a job. It is one of my 2 jobs. I look at it as being a blessing for me to be able to help in any way I can for this to happen. I've seen so many students. Half of Project Parole graduated from the Bible college. In, I think it was 2008, 7 of us graduates from the ministry, Foundation for Ministry class was asked if we wanted to interested and volunteered to do confirmation retreats. And by the way, once we finished Foundation for Ministry, we was commissioned by the Bishop of Baton Rouge as Catholic peer ministers. That made us able to do devotional services. It made us able to teach RCIA classes. It made us able to co-facilitate other foundation classes. And most importantly, it made us able to bring communion to people that's locked in cells and people on the hospital ward. We jumped at the chance to do confirmation classes. The response that we received, confirmation classes for students 17, 18 years old. Usually there'd be about 25 students and there'd be about 20 chaperones. Chaperones was parents, grandparents, godparents. You never know who was going to show up as a chaperone. We've had police officers there. We've had, I think, one state senator come with somebody. The effects feedback that we got off them retreats was simply amazing. And really all we did, they would come in, do a tour, come in, spend about 4 hours with us. It would be 3 of us give presentations. We would tell about how we was raised, how we got off into whatever the drugs, the alcohol that got us into the crime we doing time for. We always took responsibility for our actions. We always acknowledged the victims and the people that we hurt, that suffered because of our actions. And we always made those kids one promise. We told them, be confirmed, live out your faith, embrace it. And we always made them a promise at every retreat. We promise you that if you will be confirmed, embrace your faith, and live it out, you will never, ever regret it. We got so much feedback from the kids, from the chaperones. Sometimes I don't know which one was impacted the most, the chaperones or the kids. We certainly was. And we couldn't understand for a long time why the impact we was having on these people was what it was. Jay Jackson told us one day, he said, you stand up before these people, you take your responsibility, you acknowledge the people that you have hurt drastically in your life, and they see you as human beings. And that really, really blew us away that we was able to do that, and they looked at us like that. One of the most impacted classes, things that I've done here, I was asked to co-facilitate the first, and as far as I know, the only Kairos 3-day retreat for death row in the United States. I watched 10 men come off death row and spend 3 days with Kairos volunteers. I watched God change their whole life. It impacted them in a way I could not believe. One of those 10 men was into Satan worship. That man left that 3-day retreat with a personal relationship with Christ. I go back to them Kairos retreats every week for the weekly meeting, and they are stronger today than they was when they had that. Kairos is, it was an amazing thing to see those Kairos volunteers go in there and show those men by their example Christ's love and how that impacted their life. But that's Kairos. Another really impactful thing that we volunteered, Miss Amy Aber and Dr. Gamble organized a Christmas banquet for TU mental patients. And Dale Carnegie sponsored it. And for up until COVID, there would be 4 or 5 of us take the food over there, and we would serve the food, and we watched the mental health patients come out of their cells, spend 3 or 4 hours enjoying meals, enjoying games, enjoying music, and you could see the radiance on their face that they wasn't in prison no more. That was impactful for me. Very impactful. I have volunteered for co-facilitate 12-step classes. I've volunteered to co-facilitate other foundation classes. I do Bible studies. I've worked 12 years at the rodeo as a volunteer to help raise money for Dale Carnegie, which I'm a member of. I've worked in the vision shed for AA and for LJYA to help them raise money, concessions. I have come to understand my biggest understanding in ministry and what I have been taught and what God has blessed me with is simply the ministry of presence. That means you be there for a person. A lot of times you don't use words. You be present, you listen, and you let that person know that you care about that person. I have done a lot of ministry in this prison one-on-one. I've talked to wardens from all across the United States that used to come in here, and they would meet with three or four of us tutors and spend 2 or 3 hours with us. They came here to see what moral rehabilitation was about. And some of them was completely shocked what they seen in Angola. And we would share our stories with them, and we would tell the impact of the Bible college had on our life and how it equipped us to go back out into our environment and evangelize. I've talked to groups of people that Mr. Valdez brings in here to the ranch house 5 or 6 times. He is the one that orchestrated the building of Our Lady of Guadalupe Chapel and remodeling St. Augustine. He used to bring busloads of people up to the ranch house. A lot of these was people's sons and daughters. And there would be 3 or 4 of us called up there to share our story. I have a reentry plan, which consists of parole project, and they are very well equipped to help me to readjust. I have all intentions of being involved in AA and NA classes when I get out of here, not just to help me, because I fully understand addiction, alcohol, or drugs, there's no cure for it. There's never a cure for it. It's a process, lifelong process. But I also want to be involved with them to help other people, because I know the consequences of alcohol and drugs. I know what they do. I have all intentions of embracing these programs. I've come to know so many people in the Diocese of Baton Rouge that is connected with churches and Catholic charities, and I plan on doing everything I can to give back what God has given me since I've been here. My long-range plan is I want to go, me and my fiance, she's been coming here for 31 years. She's been a reporter in Worcester, Massachusetts for 36 years. She has tremendous contacts that these people are more than willing to embrace me and help me in any way they can. My long-range plan is for us to be married and transfer parole to Massachusetts. I have a job here in Louisiana. I have a job offer in Massachusetts. Tanya's family is perfectly willing to embrace me and help me in any way they can. My family is perfectly willing to embrace me in any way they can. So I'm set for that. I'm confident in that. My major mission in life, and I want the board to understand this, is to wherever I go, is to be an agent of change, not one of destruction, because the first part of my life was just that. And there's no way I can sit here and try to express to you people what the programs, what God has done through the people that he's put in my life in the last 42 and a half years. That in no way makes up for my actions. That in no way makes up for it, but it gives me the incentive to try to help other people and try to help other people to get on the path that can move them in the direction that they come to accept their responsibility and move forward and help other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Warden, you have anything to tell us about Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Mr. Kirkpatrick represented himself well. He went over all his achievements while he was here. I will say that he hasn't had in the 42 years here, he has a total of 14 DV reports, the last one being in 2002. So, I mean, I really can't say much more. He represented himself well.
We have a list of people in support, and we have some that would like to speak. So we'll let John Robson, professor, speak.
You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you for letting me be here and to express my support and recognition for Fred. I want you to understand that I've been coming to Angola as an educator and as a minister of the gospel, and also a professor from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary for a long time. I started in '95 being the first administrator of the Bible College, and I have continued to affiliate even after I have retired. I was the first and I don't know if there is another one, but I was, excuse me, the first higher education coordinator in DOC history. Warden Kane hired me as a part of his staff. It was part-time, fortunately. He wanted me to come full-time, and I told him I couldn't. I had too many other ministries. And so he split mine up and still called it a 40-hour week, and he gave other pieces of it to other people. And Warden Renazzo would probably know about that deal and probably had to sign off on it. But the point is this: I've been around the block with these guys. I know them well. And I have seen over 600 guys go through our school. And now they're about 300 or so out on the street. And I don't know a single, I know we've had one go back to prison, but we've not had any others. And they're all formidable citizens. And they have good jobs. And when they marry, they have great marriages. And they have good places. And they end up in the local churches. 100% of our graduates have ended up in the local churches. That speaks highly. Now, what's going on here? Fred is, and I'm going to say this very quietly, Fred is the greatest example of corrections that I know. He is the greatest example of rehabilitation that I know. And I have to tell you this: there's not been another man in my dealing with people who has been more rehabilitated than he. And I can tell you the truth. He is a total low risk person. He is never going to revert to his evil ways without it being able to slay him. If he did, he would just choose not to be a part of it. And that's an unrealistic statement. But the truth is, he is a leader among the men wherever he goes. I really don't think that it's hard to see why you should allow him to take the next step. But I don't want to be presumptive and tell you, as a citizen of Louisiana, your job. But I certainly want to recommend a positive response in this inquiry. Because you have before you a guy who grew up in Mississippi, and his language, his grammar, his accent shows it. But look how far he's come. And you've got such a wonderful presentation in this man personally that I pray for you. And I hope that you have the gift of wisdom, and that is seeing things from God's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joy Jackson with the Catholic Ministries.
That's Jay Jackson.
Jay, I'm sorry, it's typing on the paper.
Not a problem. I just didn't want any confusion.
Sorry.
Again, my name is Jay Jackson. I appreciate it. You give me my paper. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Sarah Ottinger. Well, hold on, we're gonna say Sarah for later. Mr. Kerry Myers.
Good morning, Mr. Barra and the board. I'm not going to take up a lot of time because Dr. Robson, Mr. Jackson, and Fred himself I think laid himself open in front of this board and granted his parole today.
Thank you. We also have in support Karen McGrath, a family member on Zoom. Charles McGrath, family member on Zoom. Those are the people in support. We have in opposition, Janelle Pedlo, victim's niece.
Yes, 1 second. Okay, is that better? I'll walk away.
Yes,
from the
ma'am.
computer.
Yes, ma'am.
He explained how this has changed his life being in the ministries, and I'm a firm believer in God and ministries. I can't tell you how much this has changed our lives, and my aunt's lives, my mother's life. Uncle Steve had a very difficult childhood as well. He took care of 9 sisters. 9 sisters. He was a caregiver. They were very poor, they had very little, but he didn't go around murdering. I don't believe he's changed. I didn't hear any remorse. I didn't hear an apology to the family. I didn't hear anything. And I can tell you, it's the same thing I saw so many years ago at the trial to explain what happened. Or I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened, because it's a little different than what he just explained. Uncle Steve was 65 years old. He was 24. You can't tell me that my uncle, very frail, 65-year-old arthritic person walking around in crutches, took advantage of 2 young men. Mr. Kilpatrick said he walked outside. Why did he keep walking away? Why did he have to come back? And not only did he stab him, he shot him. He shot him in the head. He stabbed him in the stomach. He beat him. I can't, the autopsy was horrible, heinous, it's a very heinous crime. There's no remorse for that. I beg you not to release him and let him go. God knows he'll do it again. He has a lot of hatred. He never said he took anger management. He never said anything. And I ask you to please do not give him parole.
Thank you. All right, we also have Judy Criddle, another victim's niece. Want to speak? We also had Steve Wilson, who is opposed, but had trouble traveling to Baton Rouge this morning. But he wanted to get his opposition on record. So we have his opposition noted for the record. And now we're going to hear from Judy Criddle. All right.
My name is Judy Criddle, and I am the niece and godchild of Steve Radosty. First thing I have to say after listening to Mr. Kirkpatrick is, he never even pronounced my uncle's name correctly. After all these years, you think he would have had the decency to even learn how to say his name. Second of all I heard from him was I. Nothing about my uncle, nothing about how he was sorry that he did what he did. My uncle was of small stature, and I'm sure that the two of either Mr. Kirkpatrick and his partner would have more than able to take him on if what they say he did happened, which I am in full denial of. I can't express to you what it has done to my family, my children, my mother, her sisters, my children. It has just dampened our life. My uncle was a wonderful man. He did everything he could for everyone. And my uncle, when he found out I was getting married, he offered his home. And the pictures that were taken in his living room of me as a bride have been blemished by the murder scene that I witnessed when I went to his house after he was killed. Please do not let this vicious animal out. He deserves to stay in there for the rest of his life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Also, we have Mr. Butch Wilson with the District Attorney's Office in opposition, wanting to speak. Mr. Wilson?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. Mr. Kirkpatrick had an awful lot to say, but I would ask you to take note of what he didn't say about the crime itself. He only told you facts that did not make him look bad. He did not mention the robbery of the victim, in addition to the vicious murder of this poor man, this elderly man, that these two young men beat, stabbed, and then shot. They ransacked his house and robbed him. They then stole his truck full of his property, went to Mississippi, where the report notes that an overwhelming amount of the victim's property was found in Mr. Kirkpatrick's home when he was arrested. He doesn't mention any of that. Most importantly, he does not mention the fact that he and his cohort cut the telephone lines of the victim's home. They cut the man's phone lines. So if he was still alive, he would not have even been able to call for help. This was a robbery murder. That was their intent. This is a vicious man. It was a vicious crime. When he was in jail awaiting trial for this crime, he blinded a cellmate, blinded him. I mean, think about this, about what goes through this man's head. Now, he's had a lot of time to get what he wants to tell you, very polished and down, and he's a good speaker. And he had an awful lot to say about the fact that he has found religion. But and we're very happy for that. Don't get me wrong. But as a man who's found religion, he should know good and well that confession is good for the soul. And he has not confessed before you today. He has not. The victim's nieces are absolutely correct that he has not offered them an apology. He has told you nothing except about himself and all the positive things that in his perception has helped his life out, but they haven't helped out anyone else. Not in our opinion, not as far as the victims are concerned. This was absolutely vicious. This man has no real remorse. He has minimized his conduct to you today, and he has not given you a full confession, nor has he apologized to the victims. He is not deserving of parole. On behalf of the district attorney for the parishes of St. Tammany and Washington, we strongly oppose parole in this case, and we respectfully ask you to deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the record also reflects that the sheriff is opposed to this release also. Next, we're gonna go to Ms. Ottinger, the attorney for Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks so much for the opportunity to appear in front of you today. I wanted to, because I think this is very important, I want to know if Fred would like to address those concerns.
Yes, you asked me 2 questions and I did not understand I had the opportunity. I had all intentions of starting out by saying I would like to take the opportunity to express my sincere, heartfelt sorrow to Mr. Radowski's people. And I'm sorry that I can't pronounce his name right. I never have been able to pronounce it. I've tried to pronounce it. I took Mr. Radowski's life. And I know I am guilty of the grief and sorrow that Mr. Radowski's family has endured for the past 32 years. They have all the right in the world to hate me. There's nothing that I can say that can make a difference in my actions and their loss. There's nothing that I can do that will make a difference in my actions and their loss. Still, I want them to know I take responsibility for causing them the grief and the suffering that I know they have suffered throughout the last 42 years. My family has suffered because of my actions the last 42 years. I installed fear in the parish and the community that this crime happened in. I further reinforced fear in the whole country behind my actions. I understand that my actions has hurt so many people and caused so much pain. I live with that remorse and that guilt every day of my life. Every day. I have relived in my mind January the 27th, the night of January the 27th, 1,000 times. The only factor that I can ever come up with was fear. I want this board to fear that I did not know Mr. Renowski and I did not know what to expect from him. But I want this board to know one thing. I do not use fear as an excuse. I sat in front of you this morning taking responsibility for my actions, no matter what fear was involved. I am responsible for Mr. Renowski's death. I'm responsible for his family's grief and his family's suffering. And I don't try to duck that, and I definitely want to acknowledge it. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to be brief because I think Fred's record stands for itself. What I want to say is that the Fred at age 24 is not the Fred you see sitting in front of you today. And he touched briefly on what his childhood was like. He was orphaned, and his brother, his twin brother Eddie is here, and Eddie can probably speak a lot better to this than I can. But they were orphaned at age 12. Prior to their mother dying, she worked on a chicken farm. She had a stroke, and following the stroke and it was a heat stroke from working in the heat on the chicken farm. Following the stroke, she was not completely functioning as a mother. Freddie and Eddie were really on their own at age 15. And there was a very strong feeling that nobody cared what happened to them. They lived in abject poverty. Eddie told me that he had to borrow a pair of shoes to go to his father's funeral. And they had no supervision, none. There was nobody there to show them what they needed to do in life. I think it's hard to know, very hard under those circumstances to know what's right from wrong. The second thing that I want to say, because I understand that there is opposition from the police and from the district attorney, that Fred will not be going back into that community. He will be going into a community in Baton Rouge that has a lot of support for him. And that's important, I think. And he will try then to move on to Massachusetts. I've known Fred since 1990, when I was 2. But the man I met in 1990 is not the man he is today. I could not have imagined that he would do as extraordinarily well as he has done. And I really hope that this board will consider releasing him on parole. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any, obviously.
Your case has been assigned to Mr. Tillis. You'll go ahead and begin the interview. Question.
This is Bill. How you doing, Mr. Kirkpatrick?
How you doing, sir?
I've reviewed your case from the beginning of the week up until 2:30 this morning. And you explained a lot in your talk. A lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. This has been a roller coaster for me. I'm really happy to see that you've changed your life. The other questions I wanted to ask was, and I think you may have elaborated on it, you all took things from him, robbed him.
You took things from him? You
Yes,
were
sir.
able to-
Yes, sir.
I read where you drove back and you sold these things or you've kept some of them. Can you
No,
hear
sir.
me?
No, sir, there was nothing ever sold and nothing else. The arresting police officers took the stuff from my co-defendant's sister's house.
Okay. I heard in your talk, you said you stabbed him and your friend shot him.
Yes, sir. I did not know Mr. Radonsky had been shot until I got to Mississippi and I was arrested.
Okay. I have no more questions. Not you have any questions?
All right, is the board ready to vote?
I'd like to call for executive session.
I'll second.
Okay. I vote yes.
Cheryl Renassa,
Yes.
Dana Barrow,
Yes.
Chuck Tilley.
Yes.
All right. Board's come back to session from executive session and we'll begin the vote with Mr. Tillis, who's been assigned the case.
Do we have to roll call?
Chuck Tilley,
Here.
Dana Barrow,
Here.
Cheryl Renassa.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are gonna begin the vote now and we'll begin with Mr. Tillis, who's been assigned the case.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, I commend you on all the wonderful things you've done and you've come a long way, a very long way. And my heart goes out, but at this time, I'm going to have to deny.
Ms. Renassa?
All right, Mr. Kirkpatrick, I saw you in 2020 at your pardon hearing. I think you've learned even to talk even better since then. You like to talk, don't you? That must be one of the things you learned in ministry. I'm very impressed with the work and I noted on my decision at the pardon board, and I stick by it today, my vote would be to grant your parole because of your extraordinary achievements since incarceration and the positive impact you've had on so many lives. And that would be contingent upon going to the parole project eventually in Massachusetts. I wish you well.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, I have to vote to deny parole. I see in the file where the victim's family had agreed to take the death penalty off the table for life without the eligibility of parole. That was a break by itself. The reduction from a death sentence to life was a reduction. We have strong law enforcement opposition, strong victim opposition. And you also have a good time date as a result of the decision. So that's my vote today. I do encourage you to keep up with the good work that you're doing there. I believe that God needs people like you working for him in jail too. Unfortunately, the crime and the deals and stuff like that was just a little too much. So today, your parole has been denied, but I encourage you to keep up the good work and apply again when you're eligible. Thank you.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And I feel like I haven't said let's unpack this in a while.
Thank you.
We have plenty of appeals to go through, and that's because it was a death sentence case. So he was able to file appeal after appeal after appeal. And, you know, appeal after appeal after appeal was denied. And eventually one was granted. That is what commuted him from death to life. And in that, it's actually quite interesting, but they proved that the prosecution lied only about whether their victim was homosexual or not. And the prosecution made up or hid evidence, making it look like, oh, he wasn't homosexual. The whole story was for sure made up. And it's just interesting. This is a thing of the times, right? This is back in the 80s and 90s and whatnot. But that doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the facts of the case at all, in my opinion, laid out by the DA and laid out in the initial appeal. It's only what allowed him to get from death to life before then the governor commuted that life sentence to a term of years. We have about 15 minutes to go through those appeals, so I'll try to do that efficiently. But I first want to get some things off my chest. So one is Tillis. He literally goes, it's like, this is case is assigned to you, Tillis. And he goes and he says, what's he say? I reviewed your case all week up till 2 a.m. or something like that. You explained everything very well. This has been a roller coaster. I see it change your life. So did you stole those things to sell it? And he's like, no. He's like, oh, I see. Okay, no more questions. And it's like, I have the appeals. Nowhere does it say that he sold anything. Why would you even bring that up? I don't believe you, Tillis, that you have been studying this case and then you have one question that is just not accurate and then you're done. And it's driving me mad because it's just an embarrassment to the system. And I do not understand it. If you don't want to be there, then resign. Why are you there? Do you not take your job seriously? What have you been studying all week? Anyways, done with that. Then we go with the supporters. Sir Richard had in the notes. I could tell it was like, so I think Sir Richard was going to throw his computer and break it when the professor, teacher, minister dude was talking. And I didn't fast for I 2x'd his speed, but I didn't completely remove it. And the reason is that I think it's important to listen to this guy just talk away. He spends the first, like, I don't know why they got so much time. It was more than 3 minutes each, but he talks away first talking about himself, how great he is, how amazing he is. He brings up the fact that Miss Renatza could vouch for him. Remember, Miss Renatza was I think the first female warden in Louisiana. Yeah, she was a tough. She's tough, you know. She's a trailblazer. And we once saw another inmate who said, "I remember you when you were when you were a warden 25 years ago. You've changed a lot." And Mr. Renatza shot back, "You've changed too." it was great. But so yeah, I hate, we've seen him before. He shows up to support, and the other supporters just fast forwarded. It's the classic example of what we see with supporting comments. It's butterflies and turtles and rainbows, and there's nothing there. It's like they're talking about what one of them included in the speech. He stood up and spoke in front of high school sophomores, and he changed their life forever. And it's like, what world are you living in? Then you have the victims come on and they say, you know, the most, they say the most, again, like, it's profound, it's concise, it's powerful. I mean, laying down the fact you can't even say his name right. How many times have we seen people who have murdered and 25 years later, if they're even asked the question, how old was that person that you killed? How many kids do they have? What was their last name? And they can't repeat it. It's like something that they haven't thought about. And it's the strangest thing. He hasn't been able to pronounce his name. You would have thought through all the years of appeals and hearing his name in the court and everything that he would have been able to pronounce it. And then you go, you know, finally you get the DA, and thank God for the DA. We've never seen him before, but he did a great job. And he, you know, if you didn't hear these facts, if you took the opposition away and you just listened to this hearing, which is what you see in some parole hearings like Iowa and, you know, and when the opposition's not invited or they claim they're invited, but they don't, and you only hear one side, and it's like, okay, you know, like he was like a young kid. He's in the house. The guy come, like, you know, gosh, he's been locked up for 40 years. You know, let him out. But then you hear the facts of it, and it's like all he has to do. And to add to, he blinds someone while he's waiting, and he blinds his cellie. Whoa. I don't have any information on that, but well, I don't think so. Sir Richard posted so many links. I didn't. But you know, you just show up. You just show up and just, I don't know, speak the truth. Say why you went in there. He really, again, he made it seem like Like, he's hitchhiking. There are two guys. The guy made sexual advances. He had no idea that his buddy had shot him. He was scared, so he stabbed him. And then he leaves out the facts that he cuts the phone line. He leaves out the facts that they robbed him. He leaves out the fact, and it's like, what are you doing? Also, I wish I was able to bring you the initial commutation hearing, but because this was it was done in 2020, right before we were able to get access to these recordings. So that's why I'm not normally I'd bring you both hearings. So let's now jump into the appeal. I've ranted long enough, and I want to keep this total stream to 1 hour. So November 28th, 1983. Defendant Frederick Kirkpatrick was indicted by the St. Tammany Parish Grand Jury on March 11, 1982 for first-degree murder of Steve Joseph Radost. In violation of RS 1430, a jury of 12 unanimously found the defendant guilty of the crime charge. Following the sentencing hearing, the jury recommended unanimously that the defendant be put to death and that the trial court sentence him accordingly. In reaching its conclusion, the jury found that the existence of the following statutory aggravating circumstances. 1, the defendant had been engaged in the preparation or attempted preparation of an armed robbery or simple robbery at the time the victim was killed. The offense was committed in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. Now, facts. On the night of January 27, 1982, the defendant, Charles Faulkner, were in the homes of Steve Joseph Radost, who lived alone in the Pearl River area of St. Tammany Parish. During the night, Mr. Radost was killed from having been struck in the head twice with a heavy glass object, stabbed twice, and shot in the head. The house was then robbed of several movables, and the decedent's truck was taken. At the time of his death, the victim was nursing an injured ankle. His crutch was found in the room next to his naked and battered body. And this is part of what they said where the DA lied, that they're saying the crutch was placed near his body on purpose or something for the pictures. A forensic scientist with the Louisiana State Police described the murder scene at trial. The living room, which is why he was commuted from death. And again, one last time, we have a playlist. The governor, again, commuted this life sentence, and the governor's 56, called The Purge, the governor's list. Check out the playlist where the goal is to cover all 56 hearings. All right. The living room was in disarray with quite a bit of blood splattered on the furniture and the carpet. The victim's naked body was lying on the floor with the butcher knife stuck into his chest to the hilt. A second knife was found visible in the victim's lower abdomen, through which a piece of the victim's intestines were protruding. There was blood from both the knife wounds on and around the body. In addition, there were wounds on the victim's head. 2 pillows, which had been placed over the right side of the victim's head, were bloodied and contained a bullet hole. Blood was also found smeared on the floor and walls of the bedroom. Dr. Charles Crumpler performed an autopsy on the victim and made a determination as to the cause of death. He described 3 major types of wounds found on the victim's body. There were areas of torn skin and multiple bruises on the victim's head, 2 sharply precise stab wounds from the front of the body. He stated that the gunshot wound was the immediate cause of death, but added that the stab wounds would have caused death within a few hours as a result of internal bleeding. On the afternoon of January 28, 1982, the Meriden, Mississippi Police Department discovered the burnt-out remains of a late-model pickup truck just south of the Meridian, Mississippi. Acting upon information received, they arrested the defendant for the arson of the truck. At the time of the arrest, officers observed a number of items stacked on the defendant's home, including 2 televisions, a wine rack, leather jackets, later identified as belonging to the victims. The officers, however, made no seizures at that time. After being advised of his Miranda rights, the defendant made a voluntary statement admitting that he and Charles Faulkner had driven the truck out to a remote area and that the defendant had watched the truck as it burned. Also stated that Charles was in possession of 22 caliber Derringer. Sorry, I knew that. So yeah, Mr. Tillis, where did you see them selling this stuff? Okay. On January 29, 1982, the Meriden police received a teletype from St. Tammany Parish Office identifying the vehicle identification number on the burned truck and the belonging to the truck owned by Steve. Okay, they went to examine the truck, was identified on search warrant issued to the defendant's house. Pursuant to the search warrant, several items were seized in the defendant's home, which were subsequently identified to belonging to the victim's members. Okay. They found that the 22 is the same caliber used. Both the defendants were were waived extradition and were returned to Louisiana to stand trial. March 11, 1982 indictment. The cases were severed for trial, and each one was tried separately. Sir Richard has his co-defendant's name, but I don't think we've ever covered. Why have we not? I don't know. Seen the co-defendant. Anyways, the defendant was found guilty and received the death penalty. Charles was found guilty and received a sentence to life imprisonment without benefit of parole. The defendant contends that the trial court erred in refusing to appoint blah, 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 blah. But that's the crime. Now we have his appeal this is the appeal that overturned the death sentence. So it was overturned in 2001. I wonder how long he had. So background, he killed in his home in 1982. The petitioner in a home at the time of the killing was subsequently convicted of first degree and sentenced to life. At his trial, he stated that Kirkpatrick had been hitchhiking from Mississippi to New Orleans when Red Dose, who they did not know, picked them up and offered to let them spend the night. Then they testified that Kirkpatrick killed him in anger after he made unwanted homosexual advances towards him. Now, according to him, Kirkpatrick had taken a shower at Ratto's home and entered the living room wearing only a towel. Rados was also wearing only a towel and had a conversation with Kirkpatrick that Falconer did not hear. Rados then left the room and returned holding a gun. At that point, Rados told Kirkpatrick, "You're going to do this one way or another." Falconer then testified that Kirkpatrick hit Rados in the head with an object, stabbed him twice, and shot him in the head. Falconer Kirkpatrick then loaded Rados' belongings into his truck, returned to Mississippi, and burned the vehicle. Petitioner testified that he assisted in loading the truck because he was frightened. Now, the prosecutor, on the other hand, argued that, so that was his statement, right? On the other hand, that he intended to rob and kill him. The state's theory was that even though Falconer did not kill Rados himself, he should be found guilty as a principal because he was present and took active part in offense and attempted cover-up. He was convicted of first-degree murder in violation and sentenced to life imprisonment. It's interesting because it seems that this case, his co-defendant was accused of not even stabbing or shooting at all. And now I could be wrong, but I recall by just watching this that they claimed they both participated. He shot and he didn't know that he was shot, so he stabbed him. And this, I think, even in itself contradicts that entire story, that our friend Frederick was actually the one that did everything. But I don't know. I just realized I'm over here. So now this is the appeal that overturned the death sentence. And this is what it was. So the act that Falconer argued accused Kirkpatrick's rage and anger was a homosexual advance. At trial, the state presented evidence that Rados was heterosexual. So the DA said, no, he was heterosexual. So it undermined the whole defense. Detective William McCormick testified that no homosexual content had been presented at the victim's house. Detective McCormick stated that only a regular adult content was found, a stack of magazines featuring women, and suggested that Rados was possibly a collector of Playboy magazines. It's funny because now that's just like, that's... Anyways, in closing argument, the prosecutor criticized reference to the victim's sexual orientation as baseless and unjustified attacks. So that's what the DA said. Now, the state also introduced the evidence that the crutch was located near the victim's body when he was killed, beyond potential of generating sympathy for the victim. The crutch tended to discount the victim's ability to present any type of threat that would justify deadly force in self-defense. In addition, he was never informed that a drawer full of rubber gloves was apparently commonly associated with homosexual activity was found. So the petitioner asserts that the prosecution withheld identity of the first two officers on the scene. At a post-conviction state court evidentiary hearing held November 15, 1996, Dorothy Hibben testified that she and Donna were the first two officers to arrive at the scene of the crime. Mr. Hibben was a deputy sheriff with the Pearl River Police Department at the time of the crime. At the same evidentiary hearing, William Alfred Jr., the lead prosecutor in the criminal case, stated that he was sure I probably saw the arrest report and identified the first two officers. So the first two officers that were there, they didn't even bring up as being there. So again, withholding, I guess, witnesses, evidence. Frederick Kirkpatrick was tried separately and convicted and sentenced to death in successive habeas corpus petition. Kirkpatrick claimed that the prosecutor presented falsified testimony and suppressed exculpatory evidence. Kirkpatrick based his claims on the affidavits of Officer Hibben, blah, blah, blah. Neither officer recalled the crutch near the victim's body. And both officers recalled being shown homosexual magazines and a drawer full of rubber gloves. Apparently that's a thing. And that's why it was overturned. Now, gosh, I kept it almost at the 1 hour mark. Not bad. Okay, so there you have it. He was denied. I think probably we'll see him again in the next 3 to 5 years. Sir Richard did give me those facts. I just haven't pulled it up when he's allowed to reapply. And he is, as of today, 66 years old. So he still has hope for getting freedom. I think if he has any chance of it, he needs to own up to his crime and stop trying to still basically do the same thing that he did at trial, like the victims so elegantly stated. And with that, I'll let you go.
But I would ask you to take note of what he didn't say about the crime itself. He only told you facts that did not make him look bad. He did not mention the robbery of the victim, in addition to the vicious murder of this poor man, this elderly man, that these two young men beat, stabbed, and then shot. They ransacked his house and robbed him. They then stole his truck full of his property, went to Mississippi, where the report notes that an overwhelming amount of the victim's property was found in Mr. Kirkpatrick's home when he was arrested. He doesn't mention any of that. Most importantly, he does not mention the fact that he and his cohort cut the telephone lines of the victim's home. They cut the man's phone lines. So if he was still alive, he would not have even been able to call for help.